Before the back doors opened and Will Smith entered, the room was tense, and everyone's attention was on the next witness. The judge even froze, and there was no announcement or prepared statement, just Will coming forward on his own. Up until that point, he had remained silent as his name circulated through court leaks, headlines, and whispered audio recordings that were deemed too upsetting to be made public. However, something had changed, possibly the rumors. Will was not on the stand as a celebrity. Rather, he was there as a man who had seen too much and said too little. When he started talking, the courtroom wasn't ready for what he would say, because what he revealed about Diddy, the parties, and the manipulation wasn't just explosive, it was a warning. Perhaps it was the betrayal from people he once trusted, or perhaps it was hearing that tape played behind closed doors. When the side doors opened and Will Smith entered the courtroom by himself, without an entourage, legal team, or announcement, the room changed. You could hear a pin drop. Some people thought it was a mistake, while others thought it was a stunt. The room was filled with low conversations. The press hunched in their designated rows, and lawyers whispered strategies as they waited for the next scheduled witness. Diddy, who had been sneakily relaxing at the defense table, suddenly looked tense as the judge raised an eyebrow. He walked straight to the witness stand without making eye contact with anyone, and didn't even look at them. "I wasn't asked to come here today," he said. "I asked if I could speak," the judge said, and the entire trial changed course because of what Will Smith was going to say. It wasn't a social media leak. It wasn't part of any media narrative, and it was something that had plagued him for years. It started at a party that no one was supposed to discuss, and he said, "I've laughed on red carpets, I've won awards, I've made movies about honor and strength, but none of that can hide what I saw, what I experienced, and who made it happen." He turned slightly toward Diddy, and Smith told the way they framed it. It was supposed to be a celebration of Diddy's birthday. Nothing crazy, just music networking, a place where stars could unwind. I'd been to events like that before, so I didn't question it. But as soon as Will arrived, he realized something wasn't right. It was at this enormous mansion in the hills. There were black SUVs at the courtroom, and it began like many Hollywood stories do with an invitation. He was led inside. The lights were dim, the music was low, and strange ambient rhythms, almost hypnotic. There were no cameras you could see, but there were mirrors everywhere, so it felt like someone was always watching. Front security was everywhere, and the moment I walked in, my phone was taken. That should have been the first warning sign, but they claimed it was for privacy, to protect the guests. Will claimed that after a few drinks and some light conversation, Diddy came up to him and said, "Now you're part of the family." He grinned, but it was one of ownership rather than warmth. Will claimed that he followed Diddy into a back room, expecting to talk business. But what he saw shocked him to his very core. There were men and women performing, some of whom I recognized from movies and music, some of whom appeared too young, while others watched as if it were entertainment. He paused, swallowing hard, and said, "Once you're in, you're in." His voice was steady but hollow, and a few days after the party, I received a blocked number. Everything that was said was, "Hope you had fun, Fresh Prince." Then they hung up. He assumed it was just a strange practical joke until an envelope showed up at his office unmarked and contained a flash drive. I nearly didn't look, but I did, and it contained video from that evening of me sitting on a couch laughing at something I couldn't even recall, with Diddy's voice behind the camera saying, "That's how we keep him." Will testified that I realized that I wasn't invited to that party because I was initiated, and he said that's when the manipulation started. I had been invited to more parties, but I turned them down, and then all of a sudden, I was in talks for movie roles. People I had worked with for years stopped calling, and there were rumors online that I was gay, unstable, and cheating. I knew what it was, and it was pressure, and I didn't need to say it. Simply made it clear that silence was the price of peace. So for years, Will remained silent, grinned in interviews, and ignored rumors while concentrating on his work. However, every time I saw a news article about someone else speaking up, Cassie, Don Richard, even Meek Mill, I wondered, if they're speaking, why am I still quiet? He looked around the courtroom, and he didn't just ruin people's careers. He made them afraid to speak the truth. Will paused, looked at the jury, and leaned closer to the microphone. He explained that it wasn't just a video that was the leash. From that point on, everything he did felt like it had strings attached. He explained that calls would come through his agent inviting him to events and projects, and when he said no, things would change behind the scenes. For example, I would say no to a Diddy event, and the following week I would learn that a project that had been greenlit was suddenly not green. He didn't have to threaten people anymore, he claimed. He had systems that did it for him, including bloggers, producers, and people he knew who to call. He knew how to make problems appear out of thin air, and how to make opportunities disappear just as quickly. He testified about one particular incident in 2013, when he was slated to participate in a significant international campaign with a leading luxury brand. We were in the final stages of negotiation. I had already shot the first lookbook when they abruptly dropped me, and I never knew why. However, 2 weeks later, I was invited to another dodgy event, and when I turned it down, the phone calls began, and rumors and gossip blogs began to post stories about me that were strangely specific, and could only have been planted by someone with access. He claimed it was psychological warfare, and you start to feel crazy and paranoid, but then you see the patterns. Punishments. You realize you're not imagining it. You're being boxed in. Then he turned to Diddy and you controlled them. Everyone knew that he knew other celebrities going through similar things, some of whom are sitting silent right now, some of whom have contracts that prevent them from speaking, and some of whom are afraid they'll be exposed in the same way. Will clarified what he meant when he said that Diddy's influence extended beyond artists to the very foundation of Hollywood, making it impossible to enter a major stage without running into someone he helped place there. He also mentioned that he once went to a charity gala in 2016, where influential people from the music, film, politics, and tech industries thanked Puff behind the scenes as though he were the glue holding the whole thing together. I witnessed a streaming platform executive hand him a USB drive and whisper, "Only you have the final cut." Will didn't reveal what was on the drive, but he claimed it validated his suspicion that Diddy wasn't just networking, but also acting as a gatekeeper. He also related instances in which he witnessed other actors, rappers, and public figures act strangely submissive around Diddy, as if they were trying to maintain his goodwill and laughing as well. He was difficult to defer to in every conversation, and I discovered that many people weren't his friends, but rather his survivors. He testified that he remained silent for a long time because he believed that speaking up would permanently blacklist him. But I later realized that I had already been blackballed in a covert manner. There was no official blacklist, only whispers of doubt and doors closing. He claimed that the only reason he remained relevant at all was because his audience or public wouldn't. He explained how he gradually changed his perspective and began looking back at old footage and photos from events, after parties, and if not in person, then in power. Then Will said, "Comes the moment that changed everything," and his voice lowered to a quieter, deeper tone. I remained silent for 20 years. He persuaded himself that it wasn't happening or that it wasn't happening to me, but then the audio began to come to light. He claimed that when he first learned that Secretariat tapes were being played in court, he didn't think it was true. And then I received a call from someone I used to trust, not the prosecution, but a journalist, that said, "Will, you're on one of those tapes. They played it yesterday. People are talking." He reported feeling as though the floor had dropped from under him. I had no idea that such a tape existed, but after I came to terms with the possibility that it was real, everything else began to come together. Will claimed that he spent the entire night reliving memories, parties, blackouts, envelopes, and blocked numbers. It was all a system, and I was one of the victims. He claimed that the breaking point wasn't fear, but humiliation. I understood that if I remained silent, my silence would become my legacy, and I couldn't bear that. He told the court, "I'm ready. Whatever you need, whatever questions you have, I'll answer them." He pointed to the jury. "I wasn't just coerced, I was played, I was filmed, and I was used." Then he looked at Diddy again, this time with a sharper tone, and you knew exactly what you were doing. My grandchildren might see these headlines, so I had to speak. When the prosecution asked if I wanted to hear the audio, he said, I hesitated, but I knew I had to. They played it behind closed doors with only the judge, lawyers, and Will present. I heard myself laughing as Will said slowly that it was hollow. It wasn't real. I sounded drunk and drugged. He then continued talking as if he was getting ready to relive something he had fought to forget. After that, I heard Diddy say something, like, "That's how we break them in." Then, as they were saying my name while doing things I don't even want to repeat, he said, "It wasn't just humiliating, it was horrifying." He said, "There's a difference between being stripped of your humanity and being embarrassed." Will's voice cracked for the first time as he looked down. "I never consented to be recorded. I never agreed to be a part of that, but did he record it?" He said, gathering himself. He described how, for years, he couldn't understand why he would experience sudden anxiety when certain names were mentioned, or why he had panic attacks during simple interviews. And now he knows it's because I wasn't crazy. I was remembering something I didn't want. What shook him most wasn't what he heard, it was what I didn't remember, Will recalled, looking at the jury. If you want to know how powerful Diddy is, ask yourself how someone like me could be silenced for 20 years and not even realize it. He claimed that listening to the audio made him confront everything, including the manipulation, grooming, and betrayal from those who watched and stood by. I knew once I spoke things would get ugly, but I didn't know how fast. Will's testimony was publicized too late for Hollywood to repair the damage. The court footage went viral before the bailiff could even call reset hashtags, and our Will's words, our freak-off tape, and our Diddy file went. For the first time, the public saw Will not as a polished A-lister, but as a survivor. He described how he lost 2 pending brand endorsements within 24 hours of testifying, and another studio stopped promoting a movie he had already shot. He claimed that it didn't matter because he had already lost something more valuable years prior, his voice. He said that the calls and texts from actors, producers, and directors began to come in, some of them thanking him and others warning him, with one saying, "You don't know who you just declared war on." When the prosecution asked about individuals like Kevin Hart, Meek Mill, and Lucian Grange, Will nodded in response. This isn't just a Diddy problem, it's an industry built on silence, and everyone's been trading in that currency. Another person said, "You've made yourself radioactive." Will also mentioned a few names without going into detail, citing legal reasons. He also stated that he had footage. He told the judge that he expected backlash, denials, and Diddy's legal team to claim he was fabricating the whole thing. They'll say I'm bitter, they'll say I'm covering something, but I ask you this. If I was lying, why did I wait this long? Why, when I have more to lose than ever? For his last remarks, the judge gave Will permission to address Diddy directly. He got up from the witness chair, walked a few feet closer, and looked him in the eye. "You built an empire out of manipulation," he said. "You called it success, you called it culture, you called it love, but all you built was fear." Diddy didn't answer. Instead, he sat there. Sometimes the truth comes late, but it still hits like thunder. Will remained still as his lawyer whispered in his ear, "I saw what you did to those girls. I saw what you did to me. When you thought I wasn't paying attention, you broke people for sport." Then, Will took out an old photo of me from his pocket, showing me in 2004, just before the first party. I haven't seen him in years, and he held it up to the court. "If you believe this is only about Cassie, we'll go to the jury. One night in a mansion, you're not seeing the whole picture. This is about a system of power that is meant to suppress the truth, and if we don't destroy it, it will continue." Then, he faced Diddy one last time. "You once said, 'Nobody parties like Diddy, but nobody lies like you either.'" He went back to the stand, gathered his belongings, and left the courtroom without turning around. Did he sit there, pale, unblinking, and trembling fingers? For the first time in decades, he wasn't in charge of the room. When Will Smith left the witness stand, he didn't appear to be someone who had won anything. Rather, he appeared to have finally stopped running the courtroom. Even the judge appeared shaken. Some jurors had tears in their eyes, and Diddy, for the first time during the trial, failed to speak to anyone. When reporters asked him later if he felt relieved, he reportedly said, "Relief isn't the right word. It's just finished." However, outside the courtroom, the world was just starting to react, and Hollywood entered a quiet panic as executives led meetings. He didn't wave or posture when he left the courthouse, but his shoulders bore the weight of 20 years of trauma. PR firms sent internal memos urging clients to publicly distance themselves from any past associations with Mr. Combs. And while many attempted to pretend they were, the same people who had previously praised his family were now making boilerplate statements of deep concern and commitment to truth.